What's up, you guys? I'm Charmx. Today I'm going to be reacting to Film Theory, How Jeopardy Cheated Its Best Player. Jeopardy is Rigged Part 2 by the Film Theorists. Now, I reacted to the first part a few days ago, and it was really interesting to me. Basically, in the first part, if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out, because it won't make any sense. But to give you a little bit of a summary, Jeopardy had a player. The player was extremely smart. He played the game not backwards, but he played it not like other people did, and so that gave him an advantage. He won so many rounds in a row. He had won over 2-point-something million, I believe. And the Film Theory, or Matt, was trying to get to the point that Jeopardy, the actual show, kind of rigged it against him to kick him off because he was winning too much money. And so we are on to the second part now. And today we're going to find out how Jeopardy ended up rigging it against, I think the guy whose name was James. Anyway.
Welcome back. Here are our categories for the Double Jeopardy round. We've got ourselves Does Jeopardy Ever Try to Snipe Long-Running Champions like James Holtzauer and Shrug Emoji? Interesting selection. Should be a very exciting game. Let's begin.
It's a very passive-aggressive intro, or at least it feels like that.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show where we ask people to think long and hard about the truth, but you know what? At least we don't ask them to listen to that anxiety-inducing Jeopardy theme song. What, did you think I would play it? No one can afford the royalties to that thing. Anyway, in our first
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
ever Jeopardy episode, we took a look at the math and science behind the way that Jeopardy champion and professional gambler James Holtzauer broke scoring records and pretty much broke the game itself. If you haven't seen that episode, give it a watch right in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and bring your grandma along. Grandmas are the preeminent experts on Jeopardy, and I guarantee that she's not watching a YouTube breakdown of her favorite game show airing at 7 p.m. weekday nights. As an added bonus,
I don't know why, but just picturing a grandmother watching like a YouTube breakdown of it, it just makes me laugh.
During the mid-roll ads of this video, you can probably do some family bonding over her old-school crush on Alex Trebek. Y'all caught up? Good! While I was doing the research and crunching the numbers on James, it was pretty easy to see why he dominated the competition. But all the reasons we talked about on that last episode make it difficult to figure out why he would have lost. Well, it turns out that a lot of people had plenty of theories about what exactly went wrong in James's last game. James, who would usually wager massive amounts of money in Final Jeopardy, bet a measly $1,399.
You're no big deal, just the amount that some people pay for rent.
Which seemed totally uncharacteristic, indicating to some that he was intentionally trying to lose. And yeah, initially this bet totally looked fishy, but unfortunately the theory doesn't pan out because it's totally justified when you look at it through the lens of statistics. Fire up the calculation music, boys! In a Final Jeopardy round, there's one question, meaning that there are 8 possible outcomes to Final Jeopardy. Now, we've covered many times at this point that James gambles for a living, so he knows all about
Yeah, he's all about the odds.
And as a professional bettor, he wants to make a bet that guarantees that he'll win in as many of those 8 outcomes as possible. Now,
makes sense.
And she's shown herself to be a big bettor from early in the game.
Did you? You did.
So was she taking like his kind of not stance, but maybe tactics? Was she like his arch nemesis?
What did you wager? Oh God, 20,000, what a payday.
She even wrote her master's thesis using an analysis of Jeopardy clues. So James knows that he's playing against someone who knows the game as well as he does.
Oh yeah, so yeah, it is like an arch nemesis kind of rivalry. You know, it's a battle of the minds.
Based on those facts, James knows she's gonna wager everything, or at least bet a lot. Basically, the only way James can beat her is if she gets the question wrong, something that he doesn't really have a whole lot of control over. So based on this, he actually
So it makes sense why you'd bet very low.
makes the best bet he can by betting just a little bit, just enough to stay ahead of the 3rd place player, and hoping that Emma answers wrong. She doesn't, and he loses, but the moral of the story is that James made the best bet based on game theory and statistics. So that's the analysis of one question out of an amazing run of 32 games, but how did James wind up in 2nd place going into Final Jeopardy to begin with? Is it possible that Jeopardy rigged the game against him? And if we're gonna ask that, for me, the first question is...
You better have a lot of proof to back this up, Matt. If in fact they did rig it, which the title definitely suggests that they rigged it against him. But at least from what you've analyzed so far, it doesn't look like it. It looks like, you know, it's just one smart person versus another smart person, and it's a battle of the minds.
Isn't did they or didn't they, but instead, would Jeopardy have a motive to do anything like that? I mean, James created more buzz for the show than almost ever before in history, with the only rival being Ken Jennings' amazing 70-plus episode run, and that led to Jeopardy crushing it in the ratings, even beating out shows like The Bachelorette. Similarly, Google Trends indicates that James's run drastically increased interest in the show.
Wow.
Peaks on the graph of interest search for Jeopardy, both of those are James, and that big old dip in the middle was...
Yeah, why... Just seeing this kind of makes me think that they wouldn't want to kick James off. Just going off of the amount of interest, that would logically mean a lot more people would be watching Jeopardy, and therefore that would mean that the ads that Jeopardy would play, like during breaks or whatever, would then make more money for Jeopardy. So if anything, they probably, logically, they would have wanted him to stay on there longer so that they could make more money off of him. Even if he, because he made a lot of money. Right? He got like the biggest payout of all time or something like that. They're probably making more than what they're paying him just off of the people watching, right? From the interest. Logically? I don't know.
From the teachers tournament that happened in the middle of his run. Bigger ratings and more interest in the show translate to more money from advertisers, both in terms...
Exactly. Logically, if the interest doubles, they'd be making a ton of money off him, and kicking him off would be a bad idea. So it doesn't make sense why they kick him off.
In terms of commercials and in-game sponsorships. And it might stand to reason that James was winning a lot of cash to be sure, but that couldn't have made up for all those ad dollars that would be pouring in, right? From all the increased ratings? Well, not so fast on that front. It turns out advertising space for television is generally sold months before specific...
Oh, okay. So if they had James on there for months, then maybe they'd make their money back. Oh, that makes a lot more sense then, because the ads, even though there might have been a lot more people watching, the ad deals that they had been playing at the time would have been, months before.
Big episodes air. That shouldn't surprise even people who don't watch traditional television. YouTube ads work in largely the same way, which is why it takes months for YouTube to recover from ad apocalypse. So with ads sold...
You mean every 6 months? Every 6 months an ad apocalypse happens on YouTube. I think there've already been 2 this year, right? I think there was 2 this year. I know 100% sure there was 1 this year. I think there have been 2 ad apocalypses this year. And we got the new one coming in January. Every bloody year this happens.
Way in advance, it's actually very difficult for a show like Jeopardy to capitalize on the publicity it gets from an individual player because they can't predict when the next big fan favorite is gonna emerge or how long he or she is gonna last. Secondly, shows like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Deal or No Deal that actually give away $1 million have a little secret. They have insurance. Prize indemnity insurance covers companies.
So wait, so when they give away like $1 million, the insurance companies are really the ones that pay for it?
That offer massive jackpots for rare occurrences, which include things like somebody making a perfect March Madness bracket, hitting a hole-in-one, or winning $1 million on a game show. But like all insurance policies, prize indemnity insurance hinges on the idea that the event being insured against is rare. Jeopardy almost certainly doesn't have an insurance policy like that because its prize giveaways are more consistent, but also a whole lot smaller. At least they were smaller until James Holzhauer came around. In season 34...
So they could have had insurance, but just had it capped at a certain amount of money. If they had to give away over a certain amount of money, then they'd get the money back.
Jeopardy, the average daily winnings of the 200 normal non-tournament games was $19,939.
So have like an insurance policy for like 100 or something like that.
In James Holzhauer's 32 wins, he averaged just under $77,000.
Well, even 100 wouldn't have gotten the insurance money then. So maybe 50,000. If they have to pay out over $50,000, then they'd go after the insurance or something like that.
Almost 4 times as much as the average daily winnings for 32 games straight. Now, I don't know all the specifics of Jeopardy's financials, but I've made shows on the internet for a long time to know a couple of things about productions and budgets. And if suddenly your budget has to account for an extra $285,000 per week given away to one single contestant, that's gonna be a huge problem for you.
Yeah, I guess it does make sense why they would kick him off. Like, the more you think of it, like, it probably is doing a lot of damage to the show. But if their version of rigging the show was just putting another really smart person in against him, then it's not really rigging it. It's just making his odds of winning a lot less because it's just battling, it's the battle of the minds.
That money is not gonna just appear out of nowhere, and no amount of Gold Bond medicated powder sponsorship is gonna make up for it. So on the question of whether Jeopardy had a motive to get James off the show, the answer here is a big yes. So that leaves us with the single biggest question of all. Did Jeopardy try to sabotage James Holzhauer? And it's at this point that I should mention that I've watched all those episodes, and for legal reasons, I'm telling you up front that I can only go on what I can observe and the numbers I can crunch as an outside observer, and by studying them like I'm doing
This is all speculation. This is not fact.
in the SAT, like the bar exam. I don't want Jeopardy suddenly making up its losses on James by suing the heck out of me. So all that being said, if you
Wait, would that say Copa?
Jeopardy suddenly making up its losses on James by suing the heck out of me. So all
And there's Copa sucking some too.
that being said, if you were to ask me whether the game changed over the course of James's run to make it less likely for him to win, or at the very least make it less likely that he wins as large of amounts as he was used to winning, the answer is yes. Now, obviously, Jeopardy has the right to change anything about the game that they want to, and if they were trying to send a player home, there are 3 changes the show could make that would help make that happen. 1, changing the types of questions they ask. 2, changing the placement of daily doubles. And 3, changing the difficulty of the game. So let's look at
Yeah, see, it makes sense. It's not rigging it, though. Like, well, I guess to an extent it kind of is, but it's not really rigging it. Rigging it is where you know you will win. You know, it's like if you rig a horse race or something, you know your horse is going to win. But, you know, if you do things to make your horse win the right way, legally, you know, you just change how you're training the horse. You know, you might get yourself a lighter jockey, something like that, you know, where your horse will have the advantage and most likely win. That doesn't seem like it's really rigging it as much as just trying to better your odds of winning, right? And I guess that's what Jeopardy seemed to do, or tried to do.
Look at all 3 of these individually, shall we? Possibility 1, changing the questions they ask. Now, I poured over the history of James's games to look for patterns in questions that he either missed or that none of the players answered correctly, which are known in Jeopardy fandom as triple stumpers.
So they would just add more triple stumpers in?
Not a lot of patterns emerged because James simply didn't miss questions that
Yeah, he's a freaking genius.
often. It appears he wasn't quite as strong in wordplay categories as he was with, like, the trivia categories, and Alex Trebek alluded to James mentioning that he didn't know much about ballet, but the composition of the categories didn't appear to change significantly over time. Besides, this is the kind of setup that would probably look pretty darn conspicuous. I mean, if Jeopardy wants to set somebody up to lose, it can't just make 8 ballet categories in the same game and expect nobody to notice. I'd say it's pretty safe to say that the show did not change what it was asking about in response to James's dominance.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'd be too, not subtle. What's the opposite of subtle? Just blatant? It'd be too noticeable to see that kind of change.
So then what about possibility number 2, changing the placement of the daily doubles? The daily doubles was one of James's biggest weapons, as we covered in the previous episode, because the crux of his strategy was to accrue a decent amount of cash and then bet most or all of it on the daily doubles to get a big lead. But James also generally started at the bottom of the board with the most expensive questions to try and build up that bankroll quickly. So the show presumably could have moved daily doubles to a place that they knew James was likely to go first, so he basically wouldn't have enough money to bet big on them.
See, that's very smart. That's very smart. Did they do that? I don't know, but I mean, it makes sense. Put the daily doubles in areas where where he would get them soon and not have much money to bet. That makes complete sense why they would do that.
So did they do that? In his first 10 games, the one daily double in the Jeopardy round was in the bottom row 4 times, meaning those were the ones James would hit early on, preventing him from betting big. As his run went on, you'd expect more and more of those daily doubles to be down there, but in his last 10 games, it was only in the bottom row twice. So keeping away from daily doubles wasn't really within the show's control. In which case, it would have made sense for the show to start putting very hard questions in daily double spots, hoping to make James miss. And I think Jeopardy tried this. In particular,
James seemed to be like a freaking brilliant person, though. Like, his IQ must be off the charts. Even if they did ask the hard questions, I don't know if it would have done all that much to him. Like, he seemed like he's way too smart.
in game 27 of James's run. Now, ranking the relative difficulty of questions is an inexact science, but I did ask the whole theorist team these 2 questions. One about an obscure Bible passage, and the other one about a city in Germany with a population the size of Missoula, Montana. Team Theorist has some pretty good trivia players, and not only did none of them know the answer, none of us had even heard of these sorts of things. So this probably screwed James up, right? Wrong. He didn't select either of those. And the poor guy who did select them missed both. And James wound
So they got the wrong guy. They got the wrong guy.
up winning that game by a margin of over $70,000. Suffice it to say that even if Jeopardy was tinkering with the difficulty levels of the daily doubles, those weren't the things that brought James down, because there was really no controlling who would wind up with them. And that leaves us with
Yeah, what's the last possibility? Just inserting another player who's really, really smart and kind of knows the tactics that James does?
possibility number 3, changing the difficulty of the game. Once again, measuring the difficulty of a Jeopardy game might seem a bit subjective, but there's actually a metric that hardcore Jeopardy fans use that can help. Coriat score is a fancy term that's used as a standardizing metric for the game. It disregards wagering and only considers the values of clues that were answered correctly and incorrectly. Therefore, the more questions that the players answer correctly without missing, the higher the combined Coriat score and the easier the game is ranked.
Alright, and the more that people don't get them right, then it's just harder. That just makes logical sense.
Just remember, higher Coriat score equals easier game. If they answer every single question correctly and no player misses a thing, the combined Coriat score for the game is counted at 54,000. So, if Jeopardy was trying to sink James's battleship by purposely making the questions harder, one would expect to see a fairly drastic change in the Coriat score relative to all the other scores from games around it. In fact, it's a strategy that the show has used before, with their last major contender, Ken Jennings. Yep.
So they probably tried it again, though, logically, right? Just trying to make it harder. It makes sense, especially if they're losing, what, 4 times the amount they do normally. All of a sudden, that's a huge loss, and I mean, sure, it's a tax write-off, but it's a huge loss for them. So did this work, though?
It seems like Jeopardy even gave Ken the boot. You see, the average combined Coriat score in Ken Jennings' 75 games was 39,213. But the game that he lost had a score of only 29,000.
Oh, so they did make it a lot harder.
600. Well below average for not just his run of games, but for the entire season of games that had come before even he arrived on the scene. In Ken Jennings' loss, the game was very messy. The concept here is that by making the game super hard, even the best players are going to be missing a lot of questions and can't get any sort of momentum. So historically dominant players are going to no longer be able to get the lead. Everyone is on a level playing field because no one really knows the answers, which leaves
See, that's very smart. That's very smart. And I can't blame them for doing that.
everyone in a close race leading into the end game. So, is this the strategy that Jeopardy used to finally oust James Holzhauer? The answer
It's no. Don't tell me it's no, really. I mean, did they at least try it? I would have at least tried it if I were them, you know? Did they at least try it?
They clearly tried it. In
Okay,
general,
at least they tried it. A for effort. A for effort. But he's like a genius, so even them trying, it didn't work because he's too smart.
the combined Coriat score in James's games was actually much higher. It was at 45,406. But there were a couple of specific games late in James's run that were significantly harder than the earlier games. 2 games in particular where it seems like they really tried to oust him had combined Coriat scores under 35,000. Both of these games, in addition to them being a bad audience experience to watch, James just absolutely destroyed his opponents, winning by over $70,000. James
Oh my goodness, this guy. The people at the show would have been so mad.
couldn't be taken out by a lower scoring game like Ken for one important reason. Ken missed Final Jeopardy with decent regularity, but James almost never did. Ken Jennings' accuracy rate on Final Jeopardy clues in his initial run was 69%. Nice. But James
Come on now, Matt. I expected more of you.
had a whopping 97% accuracy rate on Final Jeopardy, so it was unlikely
If he was just 1 point lower, 96, that'd have been really nice.
that a hard, low-scoring game would result in James missing a question that another player got. So not even changing the difficulty of the game threw him off. Or, at least, not even making it harder. There is one other way to manipulate the difficulty of the game.
Well, that's terrifying. What are you gonna make Alex look like that? Come on now, he's not the mastermind behind it. Let me guess, they made it harder by throwing in another, like, brilliant, smart person, too? I mean, that's what it seems like.
Game, and that's by making the questions easier. That's right, it seems like Jeopardy may have done the exact opposite.
Oh, that makes 100% sense. they made it easier. I have to go to the washroom really bad, so forgive me if I'm making weird faces. They made it easier so other people had more of a fair chance of winning because the questions were so easy that anyone could get them. Because with James, it doesn't matter how difficult the questions are, he's freaking brilliant. But when you make everyone answer questions with the same accuracy that James can, then it makes sense why other people would have a better chance of winning. That's brilliant.
Of what they did to Ken Jennings. If every player knows every single answer, it puts everyone on a level playing field. It removes James's advantage of trivia knowledge and reduces the game to just buzzer reactions and smart betting. And that's exactly what happened in the game that James lost. The combined Coriat score for the game that ousted James was 53,200. It is the highest combined Coriat score in Jeopardy history. In other words,
wow.
It is the single easiest game on record.
See, that's the kind of game that I would want if I played Jeopardy. However, I still wouldn't have won it. I'm so bad with, like, trivia. I'm so bad with it.
For the entire run of Jeopardy. James was clearly prepared for the absolute hardest questions that Jeopardy could throw at him, but he had no defense against them making the game easier for everyone else. They threw at him the one and only thing that could even the odds back in the house's favor. So, did Jeopardy set James up to lose? I mean, you can't exactly.
Not really. They didn't really set him up to lose because there was no guarantee that he would lose, right? But, like, making it an even playing field for everyone, that all of a sudden makes him less likely to win because he's no longer superior. That's really smart of them to do that. It's not like they're rigging it against him, but they're definitely trying to kick him off, and they succeeded at that.
Say that, but you can say that for both James's run and Ken Jennings's run, the game that got them both eliminated was a weird statistical anomaly where the games were either one of the hardest in Ken's case or the absolute easiest in James's case in Jeopardy history, and the one that got James ousted was not only the easiest game, but was also the one where he went up against a player who studied Jeopardy questions for her master's thesis, and a game that...
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really brilliant. But remember, this is all alleged. There is no 100% truth.
Asked a final Jeopardy question about Shakespeare, which is, wouldn't you know it, what the player's undergraduate thesis was about. Like I said, you can't exactly say that Jeopardy is rigged for legal reasons. Don't want to get myself into any sort of...
I don't classify this as being rigged. I think they're definitely trying to kick him out. I don't blame them, but I don't think it's rigged. They just made it so that it was a level playing field for everyone, and that's very smart.
Real Jeopardy here, but let me just call out the facts and let you make the decision for yourself. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cuts.
Man, I have to go to the washroom so bad. Anyway, I hope you guys like this video. I really enjoyed this. And yeah, I don't think Jeopardy rigged it against him. It's not rigged. Because, you know, if you rig something, you're basically guaranteed to win. What Jeopardy seemed to do, you know, this is all alleged, was that they were, you know, trying to kick him off because he was winning way too much money. And that's brilliant that they just made it so easy that anyone could win. Except for me, because I'm too stupid. Even if I were on it, I would still lose. Anyway, make sure you guys go subscribe to The Film Theorist if you enjoyed this. And yeah, if you're new, subscribe to the family, and I'll see you guys next time. Boop. Also, I think I'd rate this theory out of a 10. Maybe like an 8.5. This is a great theory. And just remember, it's a theory. It's not fact. But anyway.